So I'll turn now to our next speakers. Our next speakers are Rachael Pollard and Eric Valdell. Rachael is the Acting Director of Forest Science, Planning and Practices Branch, formerly known as the Resource Practices Branch, in the Office of the Chief Forester with the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. I'm praying for the day we get a new acronym for you guys. Rachael's career spans not-for-profit, consulting, and public service. She has over 25 years' experience working for the province of BC in the natural resources sector. After a few years consulting with a forestry consulting firm in Vanderhoof, she began working for the Ministry of Forests as a district planner. And since then, she's worked primarily in land use planning. For 5 years before joining the Office of the Chief Forester in 2020, Rachael held the position of district manager with the Thompson Rivers Natural Resource District in Kamloops. Eric is the Director of Resource Management for the Thompson Okanagan region in FLNRORD. He was one of the key designers, go ahead Derek and just scroll up, one of the key designers of the BC Provincial Cumulative Effects Framework and is a professional agrologist. Eric has a master's in environmental science from the University of Calgary, where his research topic was the cumulative effects of landscape disturbance on salmonids. In his current role, advancement of collaborative stewardship and planning of watersheds, landscapes, and values with First Nation communities is underway in select areas of the central interior. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rachael and Eric.
So thanks, everyone. Eric and I were I should just start by introducing ourselves and then I'll get into things. So of course, thanks for the introduction, Jason. I'm Rachael Pollard. I'm in a new role now, Office of the Chief Forester. As Jason was saying, we are here today to talk about Elephant Hill, so I'll talk about it from the experience in a prior position. Eric Valdell, my colleague, also introduced by Jason. We are both here in Kamloops, and so wanted to acknowledge that we're joining you today, not from the same place, obviously, in the heart of Secwepemc and the traditional territory of Tecumseh to Secwepemc. Grateful to be able to live and work and play here. So the purpose of, and we were sort of saying, goodness, Angie and Shar and Sarah gave our presentation for us. We have nothing left to say, but hopefully we can just add a few perspectives. We wanted to, or we were asked to give a presentation on Elephant Hill Post-Wildfire Landbase Recovery and other wildfire recovery initiatives. So we are going to kind of give you a skate over the pond from the provincial perspective, and just want to make the point that I'm just thinking about Sarah's last comments. What we're able to share is our experience in the Elephant Hill post-wildfire initiative, not necessarily any other initiative that I wasn't part of. That's all I can speak to is my experience. Same with Eric. Eric, we didn't talk about who was going to do slides. I'm going to try. And so with that, oh good, and we've changed the timeline. We said we would give a very short presentation so that we could spend more time at the panel. So we have 15 minutes, then we look forward to your questions later. Eric, I can't forward the slide. Oh, maybe I can. There we go.
You did it.
Okay, what we thought we would do today is talk about some background and context. Probably don't need to do as much of that because Angie did a great job of describing the Elephant Hill fire. We wanted to talk a little bit about the Elephant Hill approach from our perspective. Again, you've heard about it, which is great. So this will be additional information, and then talk a little bit about some of the select initiatives associated with things that are important to this group: watershed function, fish habitat, fish, and then a couple of sort of conclusions from our perspective. Eric, anything to add?
No, let's go to the next slide, I think.
Look at that, magic, I can do it.
Okay, so I'll do a little bit here. Angie already nicely kind of covered this, but I think key here is that around the time of the Elephant Hill wildfire ripping through the heart of Secwepemc traditional territory in the Bonaparte, both the federal and provincial governments committed to reconciliation by implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So that's kind of an important piece that coalesced at that time. And we came up with a G2G agreement to work together on post-wildfire restoration using a landscape level approach and focusing on the land. And that has already also been identified in, nicely. And just kind of pointing to the key map for those folks in BC that don't quite know where this is. The red circled area is approximately where the Elephant Hill wildfire was and sits to this day. So anything to add, Rachel?
Nope.
Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Oh, that's me, sorry. My phone is not working. If someone else is able to do this for us, that would be awesome. There we go.
Okay, so fortunately, Doug Lewis, who is one of our partners and worked with us on Elephant Hill, and is also one of the authors of the Watershed Cumulative Effects Assessment. He'll be able to speak to this a little bit more closely, but I think that one of the key messages that we wanted to send with this wildfire in particular, and with others, is that the landscape is already significantly disturbed and compromised in some way. So we are, whether there are wildfires in these areas or not, we have collaborative work to do to figure out how best to restore some of these watersheds. So that's kind of underpinning and something to pay attention to with regards to a playbook. And early on in this process, I think I went to Bonaparte in a very informal meeting with the Shaquepum technical team, and we looked at the bits and pieces and information of this cumulative effects assessment, and we very quickly aligned both with Western and Indigenous ways of knowing what some of the key concerns for us collectively in this area were. So that was very interesting. And what that map is showing you really is a cumulative effects watershed assessment, and indicating that we have significantly high hazards on the landscape that come from the combination of compromised riparian function or high road density, or equivalent clear-cut area levels that mess around with our peak flows and low flows in late summer, as we also experienced last summer. So anything to add there, Rachel?
Nope.
Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Look at that, I did it. So you've heard a bunch about the elephant. I think this is me, right, Eric?
Yes.
Or is this you?
No, it's you.
Highly. Okay. You've heard a lot from Angie and others about the Elephant Hill approach, and I would encourage you to read Sarah's report. It's a good piece. A couple of key things that we wanted to highlight. One was the government-to-government collaboration and the importance of that shared decision-making approach supported by a leadership table, which I think Angie talked about. And not just the leadership table, but also the importance of that joint technical table. So that was really key in our minds. And spending time there and figuring out just spending the time, developing the relationships, and then working together on a number of initiatives. So and Angie spoke to those, for example, the collaborative retention plan, the silviculture principles, being able to develop those agree that we were going to do those at the leadership level, send the direction to the joint technical folks who work together, and have those supported by the leadership table. For me, I think one of the things that was most important was this idea of health of the land first. It really provided us with that North Star that we could measure everything else against. So having that common goal of considering recovery from the perspective of the land really helped us park some things that maybe weren't important to deal with, but not most urgent. And then I do want to talk a little bit about, and I sort of feel Angie presented a bunch of sort of objectives and key initiatives, and those things aren't on this list. And so I wanted to just provide some context there. With recovery, there's a whole bunch of things that are very important. And so what we're sort of presenting here is some of the key whats. And those are related, not saying that these are the most important, but certainly some from the provincial perspective, some of the most urgent. And it was important to work together at the joint leadership table to help, build that sort of idea of shared accountability around public safety and some of the legal obligations. So focusing on range recovery and range fencing to keep cows off roads, focusing on fire guard rehabilitation and stream crossings, because that was, of course, a part of a legal accountability, but also so important for watershed health. And then probably even more important, the objectives around the how we approach things. So we've talked about that idea of collaboration and cooperation and shared decision making with our Indigenous partners. That was, for me, probably the most central thing in the whole approach. And then that we were supported by some guidance that was sort of emerging at about the same time from the Chief Forester around salvage and retention planning, sort of really helped to have those provincial principles. And, Sarah talked about the importance of more of those principles. So, hoping that that's part of what will be developed, partly coming out of this. Eric, anything to add?
Yeah, maybe just as symbolized by that picture there which is actually a session of us learning together out on the land prior to the fire, and we brought that to those relationships to the onset of setting up this governance. And I think that it's important to recognize that I think in the early days between technical tables and the leadership tables that there was between 50 to 60 participants that all we're trying to figure out how to lean in and collaborate. So what we're throwing stones and skipping them over the pond here, but it was a very deep investment by both Secwepemc and by the provincial government to figure out how to work together. Maybe we could go to the next slide.
Awesome. Sorry, my phone keeps disconnecting. So hopefully someone can help us. There we go. We don't need to go into this at all in the interest of time, but just wanted to, you can look this up on the internet. There was these principles around a landscape level approach for planning salvage and retention, really looking at what do we need to not salvage first in a different kind of approach and different way of thinking. And I think that was really helpful for us to have what we wanted to do kind of supported by these provincial perspectives. Next slide.
So we thought we would just highlight, and obviously we don't have the time to go into all these initiatives, and these are only a few of the initiatives that we took on together, but building on what was kind of a new way of thinking for us, provincial government, from a salvage and planning perspective from the Chief Forester. We worked on a strategic retention plan, and which was also the salvage guidance. And this map is giving you a sense of what that looks and smells like, and that the colored areas identify the different categories of retention that we had in the land base. It was very hydrologically focused. We knew that we were going to have significant hydrological challenges. And the white areas are conversely those areas that were available for harvest. So the colored areas really gave us some focus to figure out how to go out together and to do that collaborative monitoring. We set up territorial patrol with the help of Angie and her team, and really tried to figure out what areas could be released for harvest after we've assessed to see whether they need some other form of mitigation. And this plan actually went through and was supported by all the Secwepemc chiefs and the directors, which was then implemented. So that was one of our very first forays into collaborating and working together. Other bits and pieces in thinking about a playbook later on that's super important is rehabilitating all the fire guard that's on the land base. It was the case in 2017. It's certainly the case today. So it's a very important topic to figure out how to collaborate on and mitigate in very quick order. Another piece that was very different for us here was our reforestation approaches. And most folks think that we reforest only areas that are salvaged on the land base, but that's not the case here. And in fact, we've actually reforested more parts of the land base and restored them by working with Secwepemc to develop new stocking standards, etc. But we've restored more area than we've actually replanted post-salvaging. So both are very important with regards to managing the landscape. And we really kind of focused on multiple values with regards to that reforestation. We've worked with Secwepemc Stewardship Society and Secwepemc on collaborative monitoring in many different ways to understand whether our mitigations and guidance are being followed out there. And a couple other kind of key pieces. We did establish motor vehicle closure to help prevent continued erosion and degradation of the land base. So another decision that we worked on together. We've worked on similar approaches in 2021. And, last but not least, me and staff worked with Bonaparte on helping Steelhead get up past the fishway that was blown out with all the bowling ball size boulders that came down and completely destroyed the thing until ourselves and Bonaparte and DFO could get together and rebuild that fishway. So we did work with Bonaparte to actively move Steelhead upstream at the times that they needed to do that. So a few select recovery initiatives, and we're only able to graze over the pond there, but we'll go to the next slide and finish things off here. You're on mute, Rachel.
Sorry. A couple of concluding thoughts from our perspective and really building on what we heard from Angie and Char and Sarah. So elements of success for us were the importance of that joint leadership council for guidance and the joint technical group to, sharing, I guess, really ensuring that walking on two legs approach that Angie talked about. Having the North Star of the health of the land, first and foremost, helped us focus on the things that we needed to do in the immediate, the short term, the longer term, and making sure we were really focusing on multiple values through our planning for salvage and retention, the silviculture activities that Eric's just talked about. Just really making sure we're looking at all the values on the landscape. And I will turn it to Eric for last couple of comments, and then we have a bit of a next step.
Yeah, so we're still working on Elephant Hill, and while we're still working on Elephant Hill, we get smoked with 16 other major wildfires, drought, and a variety of other challenges, heat domes, etc. So it's not like we've actually tidied this one up and finished. We still got lots of work to do, and there is the need for longer term restoration, and some of those initiatives have been started. Any last words, Rachel?
Thanks. Yeah, just to say that I think that, Sarah and Angie and Char talked about what the future should look like and what we should do next. And so really excited to see that this conversation is going on, because I think, perspective, one of the things that got really messy was we were trying to figure out what to do and also building our relationships and working together and then trying to go and do it. And as much as possible, if we had ideas about the things that would be helpful for fish and fish habitat or other things, that'd be great. So glad to see that this conference is happening in this work. And I do know that the province is thinking about some sort of a provincial framework for recovery that would be principled and flexible at the local level and make sure it makes the space for the right conversations and relationships that need to happen. So excited about that. I think that's it. I see we're at 0 for time.